Hello and welcome. I'm so glad that you're here to this class, what I never learned in school to be a marriage and sex therapist, but I needed to know to save myself and to save my marriage. So it's so nice to meet you. Grab your favorite tea. I'm going to bring us in with one of my favorite sounds because one of the things you're going to learn is that frequency is everything. And the sound of these Koshi chimes, whew, have a very sorbet-like impact. So let's get started. The most relatable and effective guides are those who've walked their own heroines' or heroes' journeys, the people who've gone through their own shit and come out the other side more whole. That's one of my favorite quotes. And I said that. And I believe it too. And I will tell you more a little bit later why. So my marriage began 24 and a half years ago with a crash rather than a bang. I was 26 years old. I just married my best friend and rock climbing partner, Greg. So here are a few pictures of us. These were those old photos that were paper that you probably remember if you're in my age demographic. My husband was a triathlete. He had this spunky spirit, still does, of so much life. So he could run a 5-minute mile. He was swimming, many miles. He and I drove across the country and rock climbed all over in so many states for our honeymoon. I was running half marathons. So our life was very embodied in our bodies. We were backpackers, we were campers. And so I was looking forward to many years of adventuring with this man before we decided to settle down and have a family. 8 months after we were married, my husband was commuting on bike to work. So he would ride 15 miles each way to work, still does, spoiler alert. And he was biking to work. And then 40 minutes after he left the house, I received a call from the chaplain of the University Medical Center. Yes, you're hearing me right. I can feel my heart beating even as I say that. And he said to me, "Are you Mrs. Glick?" And it took me a minute because I was newly married to say, "Yes, I am." And he said to me, "You need to come down to the ER immediately. There's been an accident." That's all he said. I got there and it was like a scene out of that show ER. Did you ever watch that? Where I was in this full-on panic. I couldn't find anybody to help me. I burst through these double doors and there were 5 doctors standing in line in the hallway, ashen face looking at me. One of them was an MD PhD student who was a friend of ours, and he looked straight at me and I knew that it was bad. They took me into the room where my husband was. And the police officer who was the first on the scene said to me, "He's lucky to be alive. He was thrown 150 feet and hit the pavement." The driver didn't even hit his brakes. He was going 40 miles per hour when he ran the red light. That surgeon said, "I will likely need to amputate his leg." They said he will never walk again, ride a bike, climb, none of it. Over 20 years as a police officer, and I've never seen someone survive a collision like that. Oh my gosh, I'm getting sort of teary. It was really intense. And if you've gone through something like this with a loved one, you probably feel this in your body right now. On his 3rd day in the hospital, I discovered I was pregnant. Not exactly how I thought I would start my marriage at 26. So back then I was a strong feminist kind of a gal. I knew how to work hard and I knew how to get things done. And obviously this was an extraordinary situation. So I pulled up my big girl pants and I took care of business. I got tougher, I got busier, and I took care of things. So here's a picture of us when he came out of the hospital many months later. He ended up having many, many surgeries on his legs, bone grafts. He has steel in his body, but he can walk and do all the things. He can't run so well, but he still does most everything else that he's wanted to do. And there I am pregnant, and our son, Toby, who was born in 2001. So we started scraping our lives together again, like maybe you have. We went back to school for both of us. My husband had lots of surgeries. He was doing all kinds of therapies to learn how to walk again and get back his proprioception. He decided to go back to school to be a physician assistant. I went back to school to get a degree in marriage, family, and child therapy because I was realizing, holy goodness, I do not know what I'm doing. This is not going how I thought it was going to go. I married a man who's my best friend, and I'm showing up in ways that are not serving us. When our son was a toddler, he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so at that point, we were both in school. We had school debt happening. We weren't making very much money. And then our son gets saddled with this diagnosis that threw just another huge wrench into our life. So at this point, we've been married just under 5 years. And the weight of it all was so daunting. So in 2006, here we are. We had a tandem that we put a tag along on, and we'd bike our son to school in the mornings to kindergarten. So here we are, two highly educated adults, and we are sucking in marriage. So we had this great kid, we had great degrees, and we're building really cool careers, but our marriage was not going as desired. We had financial trouble. Our sex life was in the dumpster. We had conflicts around parenting. Oh my gosh, all of you who have children with special needs or learning needs that are different, neuroatypical children, that comes up so much where you just have different ways of seeing parenting, right? So we had conflict around that. We weren't sleeping. Part of the situation with our son was one of us needed to get up to check his blood sugar at night. Children back then, it's a little different now, have what's called dead in bed syndrome. Before we had continuous glucose monitoring. And so one of us would get up every 2 to 3 hours for a decade. So lack of sleep was a big situation for us. We were both very busy trying to build our careers. We felt like we had no time for our marriage. We couldn't find childcare because we didn't have anybody that we could really leave our son with. I felt this huge disappointment about never really having a honeymoon. And so again, for those of you who might have gone through something like this, that kind of resentment that can come because we didn't get to have that like blissful period that people talk about. I'd wondered if I had married the right person. So all of the time I was wondering, is this the right person for me? I'm moving my face around. I hope that's okay. I thought I was broken, wrong. I wasn't trying hard enough. So I was reading all kinds of self-help books, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I was convinced that my husband was doing a lot of things wrong. And so I was nagging him silently a lot. I was pulling away. I was very resentful. And I compared our lives to other people's lives regularly. And I wondered, why is it so easy for them? And why is it so hard for us? So I did what most women do when we are stuck in our marriage. I blamed my husband. I talked to my friends about he was like having another child at home. Then I bought books for him to read, and I would put like a sticky note in them. Have you ever done that? And I told him that he needed to go get a therapist or a coach or do something so that he could improve our marriage. I would say things like, I know that I have a part in this too, but he ... right? Finally, we went to therapy. We went to couples therapy, nonviolent communication courses, psychodrama therapy, family constellations therapy, EFT, Imago, sex therapy, EMDR therapy, and we also had spiritual counseling. We did a lot. And I heard things like this: tell him how you feel. And I remember when our first therapist told me that. And the first thing I thought was, oh, honey, he knows how I feel. I do not need to tell him and pay you $150 an hour. For us, that was so much money back then, plus finding childcare to pay for, to go to a therapist and then to tell him how I felt, which I felt like we just were having the same argument that was supervised by a third party. We had one well-meaning therapist. They're all well-meaning, right? Many of my friends are therapists. Like, we're good people. It's just that these tools didn't work for us. One therapist invited us to do an eye-gazing activity, and I remember sitting in her office, and we were looking in each other's eyes, and my husband was being so soft and kind because he's so soft and kind, and I was so angry, and it just made me feel like I was failing. Like, I didn't want to sit here and eye gaze with him. I was mad about the messy garage, right? I had all this stuff happening in me, and it wasn't, those eye gazing exercises did not help. Then we were told that we should go out on date nights, and that was our homework assignment. I already told you, like, it was so expensive for us back then, where paying for dinner out somewhere and then paying for childcare on top of it, and then the whole time having our phone with us, checking to make sure our son was okay. I get the meaning around having a date night, but my goodness, it created more of a stressor, like we need to do this. And then of course, if a therapist has told you this before, then you go on your date night and then there's this pressure to have sex at the end, right? Once you get home and the kid's asleep. And if I felt like I wasn't connected with him, then it just would ultimately end up in an argument around sex that night. No fun. One zinger of a suggestion from a sex therapist. She told me on my first meeting with her, have you considered hiring a professional dom on Craigslist? And I thought, oh my gosh, seriously? Like, we are so not there. I don't know if we'll ever be there, but we are so not there. One therapist told me that we should probably get a divorce. So this is where we were at. And all of this feedback that was given to me created a condition where I felt so much like a failure. Can you relate? Do you know what that's like? But here's the thing. My husband was my best friend, still is, and a really good man, still is. And I didn't want to break apart our family. I didn't think that us splitting the little bit of money and time that we had back then was going to be better, would make it better, that I would feel somehow freer if I had an apartment and he had an apartment somewhere, and our son was going back and forth. And again, if you've walked that path and that has worked for you, amazing. But back then for us, the ways that our life was going with our work schedules and our son's medical needs, it just was not in the cards for us. So I decided to pull up my big girl pants again. And I took what I learned from spiritual teachers, money mindset programs, just general mindset practices, depth-oriented psychology, and started to apply it to my marriage. So here are just some of the hundreds of books that I started to devour. And I have to say, I had been reading many of these books along the way. I've always been a very spiritual person. And so this course of action was not new to me. It just had never exactly occurred to me at, 30 to apply this wisdom to my marriage. And here's what I learned. So I'm going to tell you. Okay. Your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and your beliefs create your character, right? So it's like the architecture or the script, right, that we have for the character that is you. And your character will play out. She will broadcast and amplify her history in your intimate partnership, okay? And so those thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions will be played out just like a character up on a stage, right? When there's character development, they write about who the character is, and that is going to be amplified in your relationship. So marriage is an opportunity to play out your story, what's happening in here with someone else so you can see what your story is. Nobody told you that, did they? Nobody told me that either. I had to figure it out. And so for me during that time, here's what I was projecting onto my husband. I have to do it all on my own. I'm not enough. I can't trust anyone. No one else is going to do things as well as me. I'm all alone in this. It deserves two, because I would say that all the time in my mind. And I don't need a man. And that was part of my leftover feminist perspective. I have a master's degree in women's studies. And so I had this real chip on my shoulder, like, I don't need you. I can do it myself. And so even if my husband sometimes tried to offer to help, I was like, no, I'll just do it, because you're not going to do it right. You're not going to do it fast enough. So I'll just do it. And so I was projecting that onto my husband. And so then he was getting these projections, being told these messages. You're not enough. You're failing me. You do things wrong. You don't do it in a timely manner. And you aren't needed. And so that was the yin and yang that we had going on in our relationship at that time. And so here's the thing, I'm moving my face again down here, is that because this was the story that I was projecting, I had conditioned myself to look for evidence to support this experience so that I could be right and continue in the known experience. So my character, right, that's Jenny, My character was reifying. She was reconditioning over and over again, looking for evidence on where it is that I am all on my own, where it is that he's not enough, where I can't trust him, where nobody does it as well as I do, right? And so unconsciously, I was running this program. And then I would reject any evidence to the contrary. And so if anything happened, if my husband did show up or help or whatever, I wouldn't even pay attention to it, right? It wouldn't hold much weight. And this kept me stuck in what I call your 1.0 experience. So I never learned in marriage counseling to be a marriage therapist. I never learned that the script that you have is everything in your marriage. And that script is your thinking, your feeling, your doing, and your believing. Those four things make up this whole body of a script. And that you get to choose your script. I thought it was just who I was. I thought I'm a type A person. I thought, well, I'm just a little anxious. I like things to be done the right way. He's sloppy, right? So I just thought this was me. I didn't realize that it was a part that I was playing out. And so here's the thing, is that all of this stuff, this is that slide from earlier in my presentation, all of this stuff on the right-hand side, this is part of the thinking, feeling, doing, and believing that was keeping me in my 1.0 state. So wondering if I married the right person. Every time I had that thought, I would have feelings associated with it. The belief would be more concretized in me. I'm not married to the right person at all. And then my mind would immediately start scanning the environment for all of the evidence to support that I didn't marry the right person. And I would do that with each of these things unconsciously. I wasn't aware of it. My awareness was not on it because I just thought my marriage was broken. I thought he was broken, honestly. I thought if he did something different, it might be better, or that we just weren't meant to be together. So this is the anatomy of what I call your 1.0 self. Your thoughts are things like, I married the wrong person, but I can't leave. We don't have enough money, time, health insurance, space, whatever it is, sex, intimacy, connection. If he would change, this would all get better. So those are the kinds of thoughts in that 1.0 self. My feelings, maybe like yours, resentment, anger, disappointment. I felt discouraged. I felt helpless. I could go on, and hopeless. The behaviors I had, I would distance from him. So that eye-gazing activity, are you kidding me? I felt so cold towards him that when we had the opportunity to eye gaze, it felt so annoying because I felt like, why don't I have the opportunity to eye gaze with someone who I actually want to be with, right? I was not warm and open and available to that. The beliefs that I had back then, life is hard, I just need to suck it up, I should be happy, at least he's not a drunk and he doesn't beat me. I mean, I didn't actually think that he doesn't beat me because that wasn't in my radar at all, but I definitely had those feelings like I should just be happy with what I have. He's such a nice guy. Lots of women don't have this, right? So comparing myself back and forth with other people, and that kept me in this state of overwhelming confusion. And so as women, we can be so amazing at creating our own confusion again and again and again. My 1.0 character was not available for a 2.0 experience, but the 2.0 experience was what I kept saying that I wanted in all of those years of therapy. So I was showing up as a 1.0, but I wanted a 2.0. But I did not have the thinking, feeling, doing, and believing patterns to support the experience that I desired. I didn't have it. And so I couldn't get it. So here's the big secret. What you desire in your relationship is the map and compass to the life that you want. Your desire, your longing matters. I'll get more to that. But it doesn't start with your partner changing to give it to you. It starts with you creating the conditions to experience it yourself. Because even back then, and you might have a similar experience to mine, where your partner might show up and take you out for a date night or do something really kind and loving for you. But if you're not open to it, because if you have this closed, energetic stance to it, which again, we'll talk about in a moment, but part of what creates this closed energy is the thinking, feeling, doing, believing, right? That's like, I'm not with the right person. So as long as I'm closed, I cannot be open to what might be available to me. So here's the anatomy of a 2.0 self. which thank goodness I have arrived in because I did this work and that's why I created this program. So my thoughts are things like, I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm a creator, not a victim. In my reality, I'm 100% responsible for my experience. So the feelings that come from those thoughts are things like ease, relaxation, joy. We laugh so much. Our life is very light and filled with joyful opportunities for us to come together. My behaviors, I'm way more curious, I'm inviting, I'm soft with my husband. I was never soft before. I'm available for him to do things for me and for me to express real appreciation and gratitude. And I don't try to micromanage him to make him do it in the way that I want, because I recognize he's going to do it in his way. My beliefs are things like life is conspiring for my greatness. I am safe. It's not about perfection. It's about exploration. And side note, if you're new to my work, I talk a lot about safety, because until we're safe, safe is another word for having a regulated nervous system, but I think of it more as safety because most of us, especially women, we run very anxious. And the reason why we run anxious, in my world, anxiety is not a feeling, it's a diagnosis that can be medicated until you recognize that the anxiety is actually fear, right? Anxiety comes from fear. And if I'm in fear, that means I need to create safety, right? That makes way more sense than trying to figure out how to deal with anxiety. To stay with, oh, I'm living in adrenaline of fear. So how is it that I create safety in myself? And that starts with this script. A 2.0 script is founded in safety. So more on that if you decide to step into this container, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. I thought my husband's job was to create a 2.0 experience for me, when in fact, it was my job to create conditions in myself to experience what I desired. My job to do it first. So I believe your marriage is your ashram. I believe it's an initiatory opportunity for you to do big level maturation as a woman in our world. But because we live in a world that is totally addicted to drama, addicted to measuring ourselves against other people, addicted to seeing everything as a problem, from your aging to your waistline to your marriage to your children to everything else, because that's how we come to so much of our world, we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to fix a relationship, when actually it's about allowing yourself to go through this very healthy maturation process, what I think of as an initiation, so that you can become the wise woman that you are here and meant to be. When you create coherence, that's alignment, with your 2.0 self in your thinking, feeling, believing, and doing, you will experience something new in your marriage. So I'm still married to the same person. We still have the same stuff around money and like life happens, right? However, the experience is dramatically different. And this isn't just for me, it's for the hundreds of women, possibly 1,000 at this point, that I've walked through this experience. So I guide women to anchor in their 2.0 self daily, because again, as long as you're living in that 1.0 state, you're not going to be available for the 2.0 experiences. I guide women to nourish themselves daily. Nourishment is primarily important because most of us are deeply malnourished. Malnourished. So we're malnourished with sleep, with water, with healthy food, with vitality, with in our electrical bodies. So we are batteries, okay? So we carry a charge and we get recharged when we sleep, when we're in the sun, when we're in nature, when our feet are on the earth, right? When we are deeply cared for in our own being, in our schedule, in who we surround ourselves with, when we are in that state of nourishment, then what can come from that is joy, pleasure, and connection. When we're malnourished, we live from a state of unsafety, which means we will be angry, bitter, upset. And it's hard to get on top of all that bitterness and upsetness if you, upsetness, is that a word? I don't know. If you feel inside unsafe. So I guide women to witness their own thinking patterns that can perpetuate the angst and worry and blame and stress in their own mind. I guide women to sober up to their addiction to stress, drama, and victim consciousness. I know that's a hard one when I bring up the victim word with women. I took that bitter pill many years ago when a coach pressed me about how I was being a victim in my life. And I was like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And I was like, oh, I'm protesting too much. Maybe I am. I guide women to stay in their own lane in their relationships. That does not mean you should be a doormat or that you don't get to have equity in your relationship, but it does mean to own yourself first, which again, I get into much more in the program. I also encourage women to give their partner a role because our partners, male or female, need a role. And if we do this like Uber, I'm so independent, I don't need you, they don't have a role. And they need to have a role so that they can have competency. I guide women to hold a vision for themselves and be that vision keeper. So really tending, stewarding their vision in their life. I guide you to be more soft, to create from a sourced place of internal safety rather than creating from a place of stress and fear, and uncover the wisdom that lives within you. Because the wisdom is in you, it's my great good opportunity to walk you back to you so you can experience that wisdom. This woman who is on this journey, this 2.0 journey, she's ready for therapy. So if you're feeling like, I really do believe that my partner and I should go to therapy, amazing. But take your 2.0 version there, because that woman is able to share her feelings, eye gaze, go on date night, and yes, even hire a dom on Craigslist if that's your thing. But what I have found is so many women who've done this work with me end up not needing couples therapy. So I've had an entire lifetime, I'm 51 years old at this recording, of providing guidance for women, men, family, and children. I have a master's in women's studies, a master's degree in marriage, family, child therapy. I'm an ASEX certified sex therapist, a 4D certified practitioner. I did EMDR for many years. I've been a wife of now going on 25 years right now. My son is 23. He just had a birthday. I owned a multi-clinician counseling center in Denver, Colorado for many years, where I provided therapy to couples in that area. I've worked in special ed. I've facilitated over 8 retreats. I've worked with youth and adults in all kinds of programs. I've also been a therapist business coach for many years. But my most favorite thing that I have done is create this effective protocol that guides women to experience real shifts in your life quickly. It's my most favorite thing that I've done in all of the body of work that I've offered over the last 20 plus years. And here's my why. I'm here because I struggled for so long believing that the answers were outside of me. I spent over $100,000 trying to fix myself and my marriage. And here's this picture's old. It's me and my son and my husband about 5 years ago now. What I learned is that the answers are in fact right in front of you. When you bring your focus back to yourself and are willing to be 100% accountable, I promise everything changes. What I learned is that it doesn't need to be so hard for any of us. And I was so miserable for so long. I remember talking to my best friend like 15 years ago and saying to her, I cannot keep saying the same thing to you, which was, I'm unhappy. I don't know if I should stay married. I was so sick of being in that drama with myself. So now my life is so different than it was before. This is me and my husband. We live down in way south Arizona near the border. And when I started to actually commit to myself, which translated into committing to my marriage, I started becoming much easier to live with. I started to nourish myself first rather than putting myself last. I stopped being resentful of my partner that my needs and desires were not met, and I started really tending to my own wellness. When I became very well nourished through this process of tending to myself and my thinking, feeling, doing, and believing, I happily was able to show up in my marriage, and I wanted to lift my husband up naturally instead of trying to blow sunshine at him because I felt bad about the times that I was being resentful. So the bottom picture, we were in Oaxaca a few years ago, and that was on a hike. And we have gotten back to adventuring after all of these years. So in 2019, we sold everything and we moved to Mexico, in part because I created this online program that I'm going to invite you into, and it blew up. It was performing so well that I was able to sell my brick and mortar practice in 2018. We packed everything up from Denver and we moved outside of Puerto Vallarta to Mexico in 2019. And my husband left medicine and we both started to rethink our careers so that we could make a match. We wanted to have like the whole life, right? That everything felt like such a match in our life rather than always putting other people and our work first. So my marriage now is so wonderful on all fronts. We're very connected. Our intimacy is great. We have a great friendship, freedom with each other. We adventure all of the time. I'm more happy and satisfied, and it's exactly what I hoped for back when I was doing all of that therapy in 2001 through 2006. But those tools were not what got me here. So this program has touched the lives of hundreds of women, and here are some of the reviews that I've received. The best program ever, simple, easy, and the results are absolutely amazing. On my website, I have a testimonials page with so many videos from women over the last 6 years who have walked through this experience and it has changed their lives. So this is real. So my question to you is, what do you long for in your marriage or in your life? Like that longing, that desire, that's your compass to follow, right? Like that desire. And if that desire that's coming up is like, oh, I desire to be with somebody else, the practice is to actually come back to yourself first, your own thinking, feeling, doing, and believing first, right? And so whatever it is that you want, most of us want connection, ease, joy, love, passion, right? Whatever those things are, your invitation is to create the internal conditions for you to experience those things first, right? And so I have a special invitation for you to step into this 10-week experience called Your Marriage is Your Ashram. It used to be a $7,000 program that I would walk women through. I created this self-study experience that you get over 10 weeks, and I have a special code for you that's available. You'll see it when you click the button near this video, and you will receive a big fat discount, not even close to $7,000 will you be paying for this. But this is the entirety of what the women who I've worked with for many years have walked through, and it's been really foundational for all of the work that I do with women. So I want to invite you out of feeling stuck, feeling overwhelmed, feeling confused, feeling unsure, so that you can liberate yourself from that. And whether you end up staying married or not, that's not the point. To me, the point is you living in that 2.0 alignment with yourself, because when you're there, you can make really good decisions for yourself, for your family, for your future. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. It's been such a pleasure to have you here. And we're going to exit with these beautiful chimes.